So, Deputy Secretary Jim O'Brien, welcome to Channel 10 and welcome to Pristina, welcome to Kosovo. It's a pleasure having you here.
It's always nice to be here, but thank you for having me here at your studio.
Yeah, thank you very much. Mr. O'Brien, what is your purpose on your surprising visit to Kosovo and the region?
I have been coming to Kosovo since 1998. It's a surprise when I don't visit. This is the first time for me in this job, just because schedules. I've seen the President and Prime Minister many places, but not in Pristina. So today worked well for a visit. A few topics. I spent several hours with the Prime Minister. One thing we talked about are economic prospects for Kosovo. The Western Balkans have a great opportunity to integrate their economies, but also to join the European single market. So it goes by this bureaucratic name of the Western Balkan Growth Plan. But really what it means is the chance to trade in energy, to trade in electricity, to trade in various goods and services with all of Europe. This is the engine that makes economies grow dramatically. And I'm really pleased that Kosovo is becoming a part of that community. At the same time, what we're seeing is a race to invest in infrastructure around the region, with major highways from ports to other ports or up into the big industrial heartlands in Hungary, Germany, and Czechia and other places. And it's important to me that Kosovo be a part of that conversation. So one element that we were discussing today is how to make sure that Kosovo is not bypassed by these roads, but becomes a key node of communication. This is why it's so important that the border opened in Madari, and we need to make it improve how it functions, but that's very important. The other thing we talked about was how to move closer to Europe more quickly. We know that involves making progress on integrating and reassuring the citizens in the north, especially the Serb community. And so we had discussions about various approaches that can be taken. There's a negotiators meeting of the dialogue on Thursday, but I think over the next weeks, I hope that we'll start to see approaches that let people know how prosperous, safe, and involved in Kosovo they can be. They remain living in the north. And that involves, I think, seeing some creative work from the government.
So, Mr. O'Brien, do you see Kosovo in line with the neighboring countries, speaking about the Balkan region or the Western Balkans, regarding the developments in different fields?
Well, in line. I mean, everyone is in their own pace, but it is very good that Kosovo is a part of the Western Balkan Growth Plan. I think Bosnia and Herzegovina is a bit behind, but it's a really important step for the country, and to be part of, again, the roads and the railways and the industries that will bring prosperity across the region.
I want to talk a bit about the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia, but firstly I want to ask you a question, Mr. O'Brien, about the current relationship between United States and Kosovo government, especially with Prime Minister Albin Kurti, which you have met today. What is the message for him and for the government, of course,
well,
for the people of Kosovo?
The message today was very much along the line of the two issues we talked about: prepare for economic growth in the future and reassure all the citizens of Kosovo about how they can live here with their identities respected, their communities able to function. We occasionally have disagreements, but that's what happens with friends. And the disagreements all boil down to the fact that we want more coordination when there are actions taken, especially ones that involve NATO troops in the north or that require the US and our European partners to be involved. We'd like to see more communication and discussion. Again, that's the point of today's meetings, to talk through ideas before they're launched. And so that's what I'd hope to see going forward, is more of this discussion and deliberation before ideas are just announced.
And how do you see the perspective for the dialogue with Serbia? Do you see light in the end of a tunnel, maybe, when we are talking 12 or 13 years when the process started in Brussels?
Yeah, I mean, everything takes longer than we want. I think so the historic opportunity that's come to this region now is the renewed intensity of the EU's interest in integrating the countries of the region. And that's both through the growth plan, which I mentioned, and the EU membership process. And in those processes, then, there's an opportunity for both countries to get opportunities that were unthinkable when I first started working in Kosovo 25, 26 years ago. So I really want to see both countries, or all countries of the region, move forward as quickly as they can. That's a new element. Now, some of that overlaps with the work of the dialogue, because we need to see that the borders can stay open, that the societies work together, that the institutions in both governments work together on exporting goods, on allowing for supply chains to move, allowing people to live one place, work another place. All these are things taken for granted in most of Western Europe. We want it to be the normal situation here. That's partly done through the dialogue. So the dialogue is continuing. It's also done by the work each country does to prepare itself to be a member of the European single market and the European Union. And I want to emphasize how much the United States supports this process. And all the tools we have, whether it's our membership in NATO or our special bilateral relationships, particularly here, we really want to emphasize that we want to see the country take advantage of these opportunities, because sometimes they come and then if you miss them, you don't have the chance for too long.
Did you get, Mr. O'Brien, did you get positive notes today from Mr. Kurti?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a great conversation. And I think he recognizes there's a unique moment here, in part because there are a number of transitions happening. The European Union is getting a new commission, and so new political personnel will oversee the integration process with Europe. We in the United States, I'm told, we have an election, and so we may have a transition of either, we know President Biden will step down, but you know, either way our election goes, we'll have some uncertainty for a time. And all of that means that there's a moment here when Kosovo can define its own image for all of these new people coming in. And I think the Prime Minister recognizes this opportunity. It's one that rarely lines up in this fashion. So it's a good moment to act.
Well, Mr. O'Brien, we had Brussels and Ohrid agreement reached. We are witnessing, on the other hand, accusations and no will for implementing, speaking about Mr. Vučić in Belgrade and also Mr. Kurti here in Pristina. Prime Minister Kurti is asking Vučić to sign the agreement, and on the other hand, Vučić is blaming Kurti for blocking the process. What is your call towards them?
Yeah, I want them each to fully implement what they've committed to in the agreement. And I think, again, we're at an interesting moment where Prime Minister Kurti, I think, recognizes he has the chance to say, this is what we want Kosovo to look like, and have that shape the way the international community responds. I think President Vučić, and maybe we'll talk more about this later, he also sees the opportunity for Serbia to have its economy grow much more than it has. And Serbia has grown quite well the last decade, but to grow more. But that's only if there's some political accommodation over the next years with Kosovo. So the quickest way through that is with the basic agreement and with the Ohrid annex to it. That's how they should move forward. If they need to do other things, they can discuss those, and we can find a way forward.
What if they don't move forward? Are there any sanctions for Mr. Kurti or Mr. Vučić on that regard?
Yeah, I think, well, the primary sanction is that they'll have missed an enormous opportunity for their countries. So in my job, I have to be an optimist. Every day I get up and talk to people about what they think is good for their country and how we in the US can help or direct those energies. And I think everyone recognizes we're at a moment when decisions can make people safer and richer for the next generation.
Mr. O'Brien, do you see a will from Mr. Kurti to implement the association, and do you see a risk regarding the statehood of Kosovo, having an association, having something inside?
Yeah, it's a good, so sending the association to the Constitutional Court is a commitment in the basic agreement. And so we expect Kosovo to do that. It's not only Mr. Kurti, it's several prime ministers before him. I do think we have to explain to the public what the association is. Basically, an association of municipalities is a way for similar municipalities to share experiences and talk through how they have handled problems. They are very common in Europe today. There are, by one count, more than 400 associations like this across Europe. And I think we need to say to people, that's all this is intended to be. It's a way for the majority Serb municipalities to share ideas on the best way to handle issues that they all share among themselves. It doesn't create a different type of governance. It doesn't create a new layer. But it's a coordinating mechanism of the kind that we see in northern Italy or the islands off Sweden or, you know, around,
in Belgium.
In Belgium.
Yeah.
And all of these things, I think, talking to people about what's included and what's not, and that's the moment we're in, where I think both governments, and particularly in Kosovo, because this is Kosovo's territory, it's a moment for Kosovo to say, this is how we would like our citizens of Serb ethnicity to live fully in Kosovo. And we respect the fact that they're in a community that is a bit different and has some historical associations. That's what they do in an association. It's a normal thing that we see across Europe. And to be able to define that is an opportunity that comes rarely. And I think the Prime Minister recognizes that this is a unique space.
Mr. O'Brien, is there any time frame for the parties, for Kosovo and Serbia, to implement not only the association, but the whole agreement, even Ohrid or maybe Brussels agreement?
I think it's a great question. The way I view it is this is not the U.S. setting a deadline. No. But we do have, realistically, this moment of some flexibility because of our transition and the European transition. And that only lasts a few months. The other problem with declaring a deadline, these moments, the alignment of interests of the parties who want to move quickly to Europe, of Europe which wants to receive them as a much more close relationship, these don't happen very often. When I was out of government, but I was coming to Kosovo often in 2003 to 2004. And at that time, there was a lot of discussion. The EU, for the first time, had said that the Western Balkans was welcome, its future lay in the European Union. That happened at Thessaloniki toward 2001. And just a year or so later, there was a lot of enthusiasm and a feeling that, okay, we'll just deal with, at the time, there were local issues in Kosovo about the UN presence, but there was also an economic downturn in Europe, and the feeling was, we'll just work on this for a year or two, and then we'll be back. 20 years.
20 years. Yeah.
And that you can't afford, especially in a young society like Kosovo. This is a moment. It may not come back. So it's not about setting a deadline. It's about seizing a moment when it's available.
How do you see the situation in the northern part of Kosovo? Do you see a potential of escalation there?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
How do you see the situation, the security situation in the northern part of Kosovo?
Yeah, okay, sorry.
And do you
We're
see
so
a potential
far apart. You have such a giant set. I mean, congratulations on the size of the set. But in the north, I think what's significant is over the last year, I think we've seen a real improvement in certainly the international presence. NATO is a much larger and more robust force. It's very actively engaged with the Kosovo Police Service and the other security services and with ULEX. And that allows us to have more confidence in what we see there. At the same time, after Banska last September, we've seen Serbia, frankly, it has taken steps to rein in some of the violent elements, and that has helped to make it better. So in all of these ways, I feel that we're in a position where we know what's likely to happen, and I feel good about where we are. I'm also aware that these are people operating under enormous stress in many cases, and that's why it's so important for the government here to give confidence to people in northern Kosovo that they have a future living as themselves, as individual citizens, and as members of a Serb community, and that that's a part of their future. That confidence makes violence much less likely. Even though we are taking all the steps, in planning and kinetically and all the other ways that we can to make violence less likely, but ultimately it comes down to people trusting in the institutions around them. That's what needs to be built.
Mr. O'Brien, you talked a bit about Banska. Do you see a connection between Serbian state and Banska?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this quite a bit, and we do. I think what we have seen is the Serbian state take actions that have made violence less likely since then, and that for us is vitally important. We have also said we'd like to see Mr. Radojcic, who was acknowledged, says he did it, that he should be prosecuted. We've been promised that will happen, and we're waiting for it to happen. So in those senses, yes, we want the state to carry out its functions. I think attribution of responsibility, I think that lies in some investigation. But for me, it's about making life better today.
Yeah. Last two questions, Mr. O'Brien. How was the meeting with Mr. Vučić last night in Belgrade? And do you think that a final mutual recognition is the best deal for Serbia and Kosovo to
so I won't go into, I won't share more about that conversation than I did about my conversation with the Prime Minister. What I will say is I had the meeting in Belgrade with my EU counterpart, Angelina Eichhorst. So we're there together to emphasize how much we are working together on building the path toward Europe. And the importance of taking strides to avoid violence in the north, but also to work toward a future where the borders are always open, where the parties are actually able to cooperate, private parties, businesses, work with each other across borders, because that's how wealth gets built in the region. And doing that together, I think, is a really important signal. We've met before with the Prime Minister elsewhere, but so today was a different thing here. But that was the heart of the conversation. Now, what do I think the ultimate end state of this? It's what I've always wanted since I was first here in Kosovo, 26 years ago.
Wow.
And I want all the countries of this region to be fully integrated into Europe. I want them to have the kind of open borders that we see in the Schengen area and the kind of wealth and prosperity that the people here can create when they're allowed to work without political division. And that's the end of it. Now, is that full mutual recognition? Yeah. And it comes, I think, after a process where the people feel confident relying on institutions rather than trusting in individuals. And that's the piece we're still working to accomplish.
And that is realistic.
Around the world, there are scores of countries who live that way every day. And in Europe, this is the point of history. From 1845 to 1945, the most violent continent on earth was Europe.
Of course.
And that got solved because people decided to resolve issues in a way that encouraged collaboration and compromise, and especially with an aim to build economic relationships that can move forward. And that opportunity is in front of this region. And it could have the same chance to change here as it has done in the states we all visit on vacation.
Mr. O'Brien, I planned it to start with your personal experience towards Kosovo, but it seems like I should end the interview with that. But that's the most important point. You're a familiar face to the Kosovars.
You have been working. Sorry for that. You shouldn't have to look at my face.
That is a great news, actually. You have been working closely with ex-Secretary of State and the heroine of the Kosovars, the late Madeleine Albright. Is there any personal approach towards Kosovars and Kosovars since we've started to talk about?
I've been here, I've spent weeks on end here. Sometimes when I'm going around the city, I look at the hotels I spent weeks upon weeks sitting in. And I think I've seen here come from a city under siege to a really vibrant, interesting place. And to see it make the next step to being a hub of commerce, to being as intellectually stimulating as it is entertaining, all of those things, I really hope that I'm around to visit and see that. And it takes the moment, and this is the thing I really learned from Secretary Albright. We worked together. I went to work for her on a one-year assignment in 1994, and it didn't end until she died. And which is a warning to everyone about hiring a new person. But what I learned from her is there are moments, and they come, and you either seize those moments, or you just sit back and let history happen to you. And I think we're coming to one of those moments here where for Kosovo, there's a chance to really step forward. The first step is to reassure and provide confidence for all the citizens of the way forward. With that, I think the European Union will be very interested in engaging more closely with Kosovo, and off that come a huge number of opportunities. But you've got to seize this moment.
Mr. O'Brien, it was a pleasure having you here in Channel 10 for this interview, and hopefully I will see you soon here in Pristina also. I
always love to come back, and it's great to be here. It's an exciting venture, so congratulations to this journalistic co-op that you've put on here on Channel 10. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks.